All right, this is a series of videos titled The History of Thanksgiving, and part one is going to talk about North America prior to the arrival of the Mayflower. Prior to 1492, which is important because that correlates with Columbus, the population in North America is a little bit estimates range pretty largely. Between 2 and 18 million individuals are currently what the estimates are ranging between, and that's of land north of Mexico. To put that in perspective, so modern day Canada and the United States would have a population in that range, while England had 3.6, France had 15.5, and Spain would have had 8.5 million people. What is important to note, though, is that there was human environment interaction. We know due to archaeological digs that there were large population centers, including a city where modern day St. Louis is, that was quite massive. We also know that there was agricultural impact, and the east coast of the United States was not this untouched wilderness that was sometimes taught to us through our own elementary experiences. And so as we go to teach students, we want to make certain that they realize that the land that Europeans came to eventually settle was impacted by humans, and that impact largely helped those Europeans to have a successful settlement. Now, prior to 1620, there was a large amount of interaction between Native Americans and European fishermen, especially. You have an Italian, last name Verrazano, who had documented in his own journal that the coast of the U.S., when sailing from North Carolina to Rhode Island, was densely populated. You also have instances of English as well as French settlements attempting to take place prior to the year 1620. And often what would happen is Native Americans would allow a short stay. That short stay would give Europeans a chance to smoke fish for travel back to Europe. It would also allow a chance for trade to take place between Native Americans and Europeans. And that would largely go with furs as well as metal goods as they tried to benefit from one another and the resources that they had. Now, with those interactions came a large amount of disease that negatively impacted Native Americans. Their lack of exposure to certain diseases, such as smallpox and measles and hepatitis, meant that they also didn't have an immunity built up to it. That being added to another theory proposed by Francis Black that the human leukocyte antigens, or HLAs, which are supposed to assist the immune system response, that the profiles are fewer in South American natives, and that could potentially also have been the case for North American natives, leading to not only a lack of exposure causing harm, but the lack of a complex profile, leading to them being susceptible to certain illness outbreaks. So, for example, in 1617 New England, or known as the Dawnland in the book 1491, an illness hit that in a 3-year period, they saw 90 to 96% of their population die due to this disease. That correlated or compared to the Black Death, which killed about 30 to 60% of Europeans, depending on the source that's cited. That led to the abandonment of villages. Now, to help set up the setting prior to this so-called First Thanksgiving of 1621, the Wampanoag, which are the tribe that is going to be of interaction, live in the region today that would include the area around Boston, and Plymouth Colony, of course, being north of that. They also have the Narragansett, who are in much of modern-day Rhode Island, which is going to play a major factor as well into why the Wampanoag were so receptive to the Plymouth colonizers. Now, background information on Tisquantum is needed to understand the full story of that first Thanksgiving in 1621. And so, first of all, Tisquantum is from the village of Patuxet, and Tisquantum translates to rage of the deity Manitou, or in other words, wrath of God. That was a name given to him while he was enslaved by the Wampanoag, not by his birth mother. John Smith, same John Smith as Pocahontas, visited Patuxet in 1614. He left a person named Thomas Hunt in charge. Now, Thomas Hunt, against the will of John Smith, had captured Squanto as well as several others into slavery when they were conducting some trade near a ship. Now, Thomas Hunt takes Tisquantum and others to Europe, and in Spain attempts to sell them into slavery. However, Spanish priests end up seizing Tisquantum as well as several others and try to convert them into Catholicism. Eventually, Tisquantum escapes to England, where he befriends a person named John Slaney. Slaney is a shipbuilder who has investments in Newfoundland, and eventually Tisquantum talks Slaney into having him go on a boat with an individual named Thomas Dermer so that he can try to return back to his birth home. However, when that happens, Dermer is trying to establish a colony in Maine. Tisquanto goes with. When they get to Maine, they didn't find quite the right setting, so they start sailing down the eastern coast. And as they do that, they realize that that same plague I talked about from 1617 had left it incredibly destitute. They actually go ashore in the area near to Squantum's birth. He encounters a person named Massasoit, who is now the leader of the Wampanoag, and is informed of all that happened and how his village of Patuxet has been abandoned due to the population loss. Both Dermer and Tisquantum return to Maine. Dermer eventually sails back down the coast and gets killed in a raid. Tisquantum tries to walk from Maine down to Massachusetts to see what's going on, ends up getting captured and turned over to Massasoit, who takes Tisquantum as a distrusted, almost slave-like individual who does, however, have knowledge of English and of European culture due to his time spent living there. So that sets the scene for getting us into the next part, in which we'll actually talk about the events of 1620 and 1621, which are known as the First Thanksgiving.